So we did have a cross section. It said 29% were shop owners, 12% technicians, 10% service managers, 10% parts managers.
You are a frontline employee doing a job, and you think to yourself, "Hey, I can run a business that does this thing." Welcome to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvine. In this episode, we are going to review Fullbay's annual State of Heavy Duty Repair Report. It is a report that is now live and available on Fullbay's website. We will include a link in the show notes. It is jam-packed with relevant information to anybody who is in the parts or service side of the business. And we wanted to not only feature it, but we wanted to talk about some of the insights that we thought were quite interesting. To help me do that, I have Jennifer returning on the show. Welcome to the Heavy Duty Parts Report, Jennifer.
Thanks. Nice to be back.
So when we look at this survey or this report that Fullbay has put out, the State of Heavy Duty Repair, it's interesting to look at who responded. So there were 900 professionals in the freight, logistics, and repair industries who were respondents to the survey. And some of them were Fullbay users, but not all of them. And in addition to that, the data is augmented by over 3,400 users on the Fullbay platform. So they were able to extract a lot of data from all of their users and make that available. The new CEO at Fullbay, Trent Broberg, he said over the years, the State of Heavy Duty Repair has documented where our industry stands and where it's headed. The data you'll find in this year's edition shines a spotlight on both the challenges and opportunities shops are navigating today. So I'm pretty excited about covering this with you. Could you give us an overview of the survey respondents? So who are these 900 people who participated?
So we did have a cross section. It said 29% were shop owners, 12% technicians, 10% service managers, 10% parts managers. And then, not surprisingly, 78% of the respondents were men and 22% were from women. But they did note that this was a solid jump from 16% women in the past. And I thought it was interesting. There was a quote here from Ashley Sowell, the CEO and co-founder of Integrity Fleet Services. And she said that women aren't new to this industry. We're simply becoming more visible. But it's encouraging to see the percentage of women continuing to grow. Many start in administrative or operational roles, but their impact often expands into leadership, process improvement, and ultimately ownership. So we have seen that, and even before, I know you've talked about that being an opportunity for growth in the industry of more women joining the industry. So then lastly, again, not surprising, 47% were between 31 and 45. There weren't a lot younger ones who responded. Maybe they just don't like surveys. And the older ones too probably weren't interested maybe in responding. 83% from US and 15% from Canada. So that's where all the data was coming from.
Yeah, and I mean the reality is that so much of the older generation are retiring now and coming to the end of their careers, and I don't know that the younger generation didn't want to participate in the survey. I think it's that there are probably not that many available to even participate in a survey because we've got a definite problem when it comes to getting new people in the industry. All right, so there's so much more to look at when we look at this report. So let's move on to the next thing in the report that really jumped out at us.
So then I noticed that out of the respondents, the median years of experience were 17 years. So people coming with, it's not people that have only been in the industry for a year, don't really know enough. Like there was a lot of experience here. And that 43% had over 20 years of experience. So it was brought out in the report too that it does seem like the ones who get into this industry do stay a long time. And I think you've seen that in your career, even your career. It's been get in and stay for a long time. And then this was interesting too, that 50% said their shop had been in business for more than 15 years, but 20% said their shop was less than 5 years old. So that's interesting as well. 63% were one location, and 28% had between 2 and 10 locations. And then you were actually quoted in the report here. Maybe I'll just let you read your own quote.
Well, actually, when I looked at that data, what I saw was that there's a significant opportunity for both single location businesses who have been in business a long time to expand into a multi-location through acquisition of competitors who perhaps are coming to the end of their careers and they are ready to move on, but they don't have a good succession plan in place. There's also the opportunity for entrepreneurs to get into this business. And I've seen a real rise in that. So the data here talking about how 20% of the shops are less than 5 years old. I see the more common path is technicians who decide that they want to maybe start their own mobile repair, and then that eventually leads them to having a shop. But I also see people who have no real background or history with the industry seeing it as an opportunity. It's interesting to see that trend, and I think that's really a good thing. We also notice that there's a lot more new entries into the industry on the repair side, and not so many just like straight parts companies being established. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but the future does seem to be a mixture of parts and service.
So the next part in the report then talked about the number of employees in the shops represented in this. Now, the median number of employees was 8. So obviously there was some with fewer, a few with more, but that was the median. Why do you think that's significant?
Yeah, I don't think that's surprising. I think that if you are, let's say, a technician and you decide then to start your own business, so this is kind of the classic entrepreneurial journey, right? You are a frontline employee doing a job, and you think to yourself, "Hey, I can run a business that does this thing," and so you go and you start that business. But the reality is that you are not necessarily equipped or trained or have the experience needed to operate a business that does the thing you know how to do. And so you figure it out as you go along and you start to build the company up. And this number of like 8 employees, what that translates into is usually one maybe office person, could be the individual's spouse. Then there is going to be maybe a service advisor. There might be like a back counter parts person, a handful of technicians, and then maybe like a shop assistant. So there's kind of like a natural hierarchy of people that will come to a single location company. And so it's not surprising to me that the average median number is 8 employees when you see so many of the companies are single location. The big opportunity here is to make that jump to a larger scale operation, either as a single location or to become a multi-location company. Now, what's required for that, though, is to systemize your operation. And when I say systemize, I mean, how do you do the things on the front line? How do you do the repairs, the diagnostics? How do you do the service writer component of it? How do you do the parts side of it? How do you do the accounting and the sales and the marketing? And people who then create those systems inside of their business, which document with standard operating procedures how to do all this, are able then to use that system to replicate it in multiple locations, which will allow the company to then go beyond that kind of natural median number of 8 employees. So there's a real opportunity there, but what it requires from the business owner is a shift in the way they look at their business. So instead of looking at it from a technician's perspective of doing the work, they have to look at it from an owner's perspective, where really what your job is to create the systems to provide the employees with the resources needed to do what they do best and help the business to grow. So it's a bit of a mind shift. It's a bit of change of perspective. It's a very common story in the world of entrepreneurship, whether it's in this industry or others. And one of the great books on this is called The E-Myth, and it was written by Michael E. Gerber. If you're interested in understanding that concept, that's a great place to start. But of course, at the Heavy Duty Consulting Corporation, we provide business owners with the structure to be able to actually go and execute on that strategy. It's time to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Lowering total cost of operation involves looking at critical components that you put on your commercial vehicles and making sure that you are making the best selection for your application. With all of that in mind, I want to introduce you to the new standard in wheel end protection, the HubCorp's revolutionary X-Tractor. Now, what I like about this product, it's the only line of hubcaps that comes with a built-in 3-stage magnetic oil filter. And this is a safeguard for your critical wheel end components. In addition to that, it is actually a serviceable component on your vehicle now. And so it has a patent pending hex thread cartridge. And the X-Tractor makes hub oil servicing really simple and easy. And guess what? If you're not servicing that hub oil regularly, you are going to have premature failure of key components. It's just the way it works. So I highly encourage you to get on the wait list today. You can do that by heading over to thehubcorp.com. Check it out, get on the wait list, and you will get the most up-to-date information about when this product is available and also some price discounts that you won't get anywhere else. So go visit thehubcorp.com today. It's not just fleets and owner-operators that need to look at their total cost of operation and find tools that help them with their business. If you're running a repair shop, then you need tools to streamline your operations, and that's why I recommend Fullbay. Now, Fullbay has features like streamlined scheduling, real-time inventory tracking, technician efficiency insights, and detailed reports on exactly every aspect of the business that you need to be paying attention to make sure that your repair shop is running as efficiently as possible. And what does this mean for you? Well, it means in the end that Fullbay is the very tool that's going to help you reduce downtime and make your shop more efficient, keeping the vehicles that you service on the road where they belong. Check out fullbay.com/power to maximize your shop's productivity today. That's fullbay.com/power. Manufacturers and distributors are a key component in the supply chain, and they play a vital role in keeping trucks and trailers rolling. I'd like to introduce you to Equip 360 by Gen Alpha. This platform helps manufacturers and distributors grow their part sales. But more importantly, it helps them make their customers' lives easier. And that's so important. With real-time insights into inventory, pricing, and order tracking, it's going to keep your customers coming back. Plus, it saves time by automating routine tasks and making repeat purchases simple. I encourage you to explore Equip 360 at genalpha.com, genalpha.com. Check it out today. We're back from our break. Make sure you go and check out the links in our show notes to all of our sponsors. Okay, let's get back to this episode. Jennifer, talk to me a little bit about median shop labor rate, because there was some good data in the report about that, and I think it's an important subject we need to talk about.
Yeah, so it was showing that in 2024, when this report came out, the median shop labor rate was $135. And now it's $145 an hour. And actually, it's interesting because 46% found that that was in line with their competitors. So this I found interesting, though. 51% said that they did assess their labor rate once a year. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, like for most companies, they should be assessing rates. About half assessed it once a year. About a third assessed it more than once a year. 12% said they don't assess their labor rate. So even just that, there's definitely an opportunity for keeping a closer eye on the information, or looking at reports like this and going, hey, where do we fit in? Do we need to change something? Are we leaving money on the table, or are we, either way, that's important to keep assessing that.
Yeah, and the mobile rate, as I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but the mobile rate's actually higher than the shop rate in 2025, averaging about $160 an hour. I think you're right. I think the way to look at this is, are we leaving money on the table? Should we, can we move our rates up and be competitive with our competitors and be in the game? But also we should look at it from the perspective of like, maybe we're not growing fast enough, and maybe one of the reasons is that our rate isn't competitive anymore. This is something that's going to ebb and flow. It's going to change, and there's a lot of things outside of our control that affect this. Inflation is driving up the cost of everything, right? But what if that changes? What if all of a sudden the economy starts to constrict and people become more conscious of their budgets and they're not so busy? We've seen that with an extended freight recession in the US. There's geopolitical things going on right now threatening the economies of the world. And so we have to be on top of this quite regularly. I think that it is, on the one hand, important to maintain consistency in your pricing with your customers. But on the other hand, it is important to be responsive to what's happening with our local market, but also to keep an eye on those larger macroeconomic things that are perhaps influencing where our labor rates should be.
Yeah, and we're going to get into this a little bit further of when the busy times of the shop, but there's a definite ebb and flow to busy times and slow times. So during those slow times, typically, oh, great, it's slow, whatever, those are the times to really assess, okay, going into our next busy season, are our rates correct? Is everything, even things like equipment repair, like to really utilize those slow times to make sure ready for busy times.
Yeah, and then, there's a lot to pay for when you operate a shop, that it goes beyond just wages with our technicians, which, by the way, the wages look to be in 2024, it was about an average median of $30 an hour for a technician. It's gone up to $33. But there's a lot of other things that you have to think about that the business is responsible for paying for out of the profits that the company earns. For example, benefits and safety. So, what did the report talk about specifically when it comes to benefits that the shop offers?
Well, it brought out that most of the shops, 82%, offered safety equipment. To me, that should be 100%. There should be no shops that aren't having safety equipment, but it is what it is. Not all offered uniforms. 65% offered health insurance. So those were the top three things. But it did bring out that paid time off and paid training time, although they're between 40 and 60% for those two things, they have been inching up. So these things are definitely things that, when we talk about a technician shortage and people being able to shop around for the job they want, shops have to be offering these things to stay competitive in that hiring.
Absolutely. And, with safety, it is such a critical component of operating a shop. You have to be on top of that all the time. Now, of the respondents, 7% said that their shops have had accidents in the last year. Only 44% have posted safety policies and signage in their shop, and 27% have no safety policies at all. So if you're looking at a cost and return on investment, sometimes it feels like kind of like when you pay for insurance, right? You pay into it all the time and you hope you never need it, but when you do need it, boy, are you glad it's there. I think with safety, it's the same way. There's a cost factor to it. You have to invest in things like the development of policies, the enforcement of those policies, things like signage. There's a cost to all of it, training, all of it. But at the end of the day, 7% is too high because we don't want anybody to get injured. We're aiming for zero. And now, while that probably won't happen, we certainly don't want major injuries to occur that result in someone being disabled, or worst case scenario, someone losing their life at work. Nobody ever wants to have to make the phone call to someone's family to say that, they lost their lives because they came to work trying to provide for their family. So this is something that I think most shops take very seriously, but there's room for improvement as the data lays out.
I think things have really changed too. I hear stories from like my grandpa and even from my dad when they were in oil, like the oil industry. They're climbing derricks. There's, oh, harnesses. We didn't have, they saw things. Guys, especially guys, went to work and did the job they were supposed to do, dangerous or not. And there's a lot of people, and I've seen this shift since COVID too, going, I don't want to destroy my body by 45 because I'm lifting things how I'm not supposed to, or because I'm doing things with no safety. It's not worth it. And it didn't used to be like that. So even obviously we want safety stuff, but even just for staff and again hiring, you're not going to get those guys who are willing to destroy their body for the job. It's just not the same as it used to be.
Yeah, and accidents happen. I mean, an extended family member of ours through marriage lost their leg this year to a workplace accident working on a large piece of commercial equipment. I mean, this stuff happens. So it's an important part of the business. And I don't think you can ever be too vigilant or really invest too much on safety. There's an opportunity with other aspects of the business to also recoup some of the those costs that are required to keep the business running. One of the things that people should consider is, for example, if you have customers who pay quickly, perhaps giving them a small discount that incentivizes people to pay quickly is a way to actually keep cash flow in the business, and in the long run can actually help you offset the costs of having to chase money. We all know in heavy duty that there are some customers that only pay every 90 days, and there's some customers that pay 45. But those ones who pay quickly, that's an opportunity to look at an aspect of the business, and maybe you can increase cash flow with those small incentives, but also offset costs related to collecting money. So I just thought that the way that most shops approach that in this report, most people don't really think about that, but it's just one area of the business that you can look at to try to help with cash. Let's talk a little bit about the busiest times of the year. Jen, you mentioned that earlier, that the report laid out kind of a cyclical seasonal trend. So what did the report show us?
I was kind of surprised by this. Maybe I shouldn't have been, that July and August are the busiest times of the year, like by far. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. It also made me think that as a shop owner, having to be really thinking that through, because typically summer kids are off school, that's when people want to take holidays. Well, if that's the busiest time in your shop, maybe you can have some incentive for employees to take time off in other parts of the year, because you don't want to lose half your staff when it's your busiest time of the year. So it does take some forethought knowing that that's the case in the industry.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always found on the parts side of the business that winter and summer were typically speaking slower times, and spring and fall were busier. But also, I worked in a lot of vocational applications in my career, and for example, in Alberta, we have road bans in the spring because as the winter months come to an end and things start to melt, the roads that are gravel become almost like a soupy mush. And if you operate commercial equipment on them, you destroy the road. So they put bans on for a few weeks. So it really does depend also whether you are over the road, transportation, oil and gas, logging and mining, some other vocation. What's your specialty? That's going to have an impact on that. But the average respondents of this survey did point to summer as the busiest time of the year. Couple of interesting things that I took from the report. We're kind of doing rapid fire here, but 78% of shops don't use VMRS codes, which a lot of fleets are now moving to. That's an opportunity on both the data integration and part side of the business to be able to use VMRS codes and to kind of raise our game in repair shops to match what fleets are now demanding. And so I think that's something that shop owners should look at. Another interesting statistic was only 54% of respondents do warranty work of any kind. Now, that's a bit of a difficult one, because if you are part of a dealership group, you're naturally going to do warranty work for the badge that you represent. If you're in the independent service channel, what warranty work can you do? What are you authorized to do? And are we doing it just for aftermarket parts manufacturers and the replacement of those things that have failed? So only 54%. So obviously for some shops, this would be an opportunity for them to diversify the services that they offer, something to look at.
Yeah. And then the next thing it brought out was that only 59% attend a trade school. I didn't realize that in the US, it's not the same as in Canada, where there's a program, you have to get certified, all of that. So that was a surprising number to me.
Yeah, when I think of recruiting people and retaining them in a repair shop environment or mobile repair, so we're looking at technicians when we're talking about this, and this would apply also to parts technicians. It's important to find people who have relevant experience and education and skills. Like that is you cannot ignore that. But most companies, that's all they look at. And I think a big opportunity is to try to find the right people, especially if you're looking at trying to retain people for the long term. And when you're looking at recruiting, there's probably not that many highly trained people available to you to hire. And if you do have someone like that you can hire, they're going to come at a premium price. So one of the things that we have to accept is that we're going to have to recruit people who maybe don't have as much education, experience, and skills. But if they have the right personality profile, if they have the right traits, if they have the right attitude, these people can learn at a quicker rate. And once they do learn, they can be longer term employees in our business. So when recruiting and when looking at retention rates, this is a critical piece that I think is wide open for most companies to make improvements on, but they don't have the tools to do it. So if you want to work with the Heavy Duty Consulting Corporation, we have a tool called Traits. It's a phenomenal tool, and it really helps us to execute on that strategy.
Yeah, so because only 59% are attending trade schools, I did notice that most of it is job shadowing of how shops train their technicians. 48% said that job shadowing is how they train it. That was just another interesting part of that.
Yeah, and therein lies even further reason to invest in a good quality system for getting the right people. Because if you are doing job shadowing as the primary way of training people, there's a big cost to that, not just in the training of the individual, but then the productivity of the individual who is training goes down. So your shop efficiency rate is affected by that. So you've got to get this right. And again, I just think this is a big opportunity.
Then I found this interesting too. So just that the median hours worked is 46 hours a week, that then 12% want to start their own shop. 84% feel the same or better about the industry as they did over last year. But 16% had a lower opinion of the industry over last year. So maybe that's due to cost, stress about that could be for a variety of reasons. We don't know, but having a lower opinion. And then 75% said they would recommend their shop to others. So obviously that's most, but there's still a group that are going, no, I wouldn't tell people to come here. That's not good either when we have 25% that responded maybe they're staying in that job, but they don't think it's a good place, obviously.
You know, there's so much information in this report, and we could probably spend a few hours talking about everything. Let's conclude our conversation to talk about where people get their parts. There was some really good data about that, and I think it gives us, if you are in the parts side of the business, it gives you an indication of where you might be able to make some improvements. So let's review those numbers, Jen.
Well, it said that 66% chose Napa and 49% said other, but that was other that wasn't on their list of things to choose. So what is that? Like we don't know. They don't know where that, but it would be interesting to find out of they had probably 10 or 12 listed and it wasn't in that list.
Yeah, so they had all the big names like Fleet Pride. They had obviously Napa. They had Truck Pro is now part of Fleet Pride. They had all of the dealership groups. So they had all of the major distributors listed out there. And yeah, there's a big percentage here that are buying from this other category. To me, that is really interesting, and we'd like to kind of get to the bottom. Are they buying online? You know, where are they sourcing their parts from? But I was surprised that Napa was listed so highly on that list because, you know, typically speaking, Napa is an automotive supplier. They've got a real heavy presence of heavy duty in Canada, but less so in the US. So that was a big surprise for me.
Yeah, and then almost 80% would consider a new parts provider if there was a better price, and 75% would consider a different parts provider for better availability. And then almost half said that if there was easier ordering. So again, there's an opportunity when we're thinking about e-commerce or digital presence. Is it easy for people? Because right now that's 44% that might leave us and go for someone else if it's easier to order from them online. But even by next year, I would bet that that's a lot higher.
It's interesting. Price is always listed by buyers as the number one thing, followed quickly by availability and ease of ordering, as brought out in the data in this report. But I actually have found that price very quickly falls to really falls off the list if ease of purchasing and availability become a major issue. We saw that when the supply chain collapsed after COVID. So don't be fooled by that if you're in the parts business, right? Everybody's going to say price, but when availability becomes an issue, price quickly disappears. And also, if you're selling higher value and you're really focused on lowering your customers' cost of per mile and the total cost of operation, price it's got to be part of the conversation, but it's rarely number one when you actually consider those other factors. I thought this was interesting. 15% said procuring parts has been harder this year than over last. 15% said easier, and 65% said about the same. So obviously the 15% that said easier have either moved to another supplier or found that suppliers are doing their part to make it easier. Obviously 15% said harder, but the 65% that said it's about the same, that's where all the opportunity is if you are investing as a parts supplier to make it easier for your customers to buy.
Okay, so then there was a statistic about hiring, which I don't think any of us will be surprised by. 40% said it was more difficult to hire in 2025 than it was in 2024. And I thought this was interesting too. 56% do not conduct exit interviews. So I think there's a real opportunity there. If we don't know why anyone's leaving our company, it's harder to get people in and it's harder to make them stay if we don't know why they're leaving.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard leaders of companies blaming the people who are leaving. The reality is the leadership of any company sets the culture. So if you're losing people because of culture and your leadership, then you've got to take a long, hard look at yourself before you start looking at the people. Because if you don't, you're just going to lose more good people over time.
That's reflected in this because half said that shop culture was the most important thing to tech satisfaction. 36% said pay, and half said it was the culture. So you can't deny that. You can't skip over that. Then it was bringing out that about 60% did about the same or a little better in 2025 than in 2024, but 20% said they did a little or a lot worse. So I thought that was a sad statistic too. There's a lot of businesses that are struggling.
25 was a difficult year. When I went to HDAW in January and we were reviewing at Aftermarket Dialogue the year that was 2025, I just was like, I knew we'd struggled in 25, but I didn't understand how difficult a year it was for most companies. So I think it's good that only 61% are reporting kind of a little bit of struggle or even maybe a little bit of improvement. But that was the story of the day. It was like it was a tough year, not a lot of growth. It was a struggle for some. And I think that when you look at a business that is in that position, one of the things that's interesting is that a lot of the respondents were talking about like how they did their annual planning and whether or not they negotiated on their operating expenses. And not that many were actually doing a lot of proactive work in negotiating and lowering operating expenses. And I think that's a big missed opportunity. At the very minimum when negotiating, I think it's important to go into those negotiations with your walk away point figured out in your head, like where am I just no longer going to negotiate? And also preparing in advance things that I call tradables, which are like, well, if you do this, then we can get the price here, and or you can lower our total price there. Or if I do this, like for example, if I make early payment, can you reduce my cost, right? So it's important to have those ahead of time. I think negotiation as a tactic and even as an art form is something that requires a lot of practice, and maybe not all of us are doing it to the fullest that we should. So there's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I think as well that 47% said either they don't have an annual financial plan or they haven't thought much about it. And that really stood out to me, but I also, in thinking that a lot of these smaller shops have been started by a technician, the business side of things is still something that's a struggle. That's not the part they're good at. They're really good at being technicians. So that part too, if some of these shops need help with more of that planning or seeing the big picture, like to be able to look at that. So if some of these shops are having a real struggle with that and it's something that they just need kind of an objective outlook of how to plan things, that's something too that the Heavy Duty Consulting Corporation can help them with their strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key factors of our strategic planning process is to create what we call levers, because a plan is great, but if you don't know what you're actually going to go do step by step by step and the impact that's going to have, usually what happens is the plan gets put on the shelf and then nobody looks at it for another year. So annual planning does nothing if it doesn't actually filter down and impact day-to-day choices, week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter.
We're coming to the end of the report, but at the end it talked about things like advertising, recruiting, how companies were doing those things. And I thought too, with AI on such a rise, 65% of the shops said they do not use AI, but 60% would like to for diagnostics and training. So there's an opportunity there as well. It's going to be difficult to make that changeover, I think, but um, where shops might be able to utilize that for better diagnostics or for better training in the future, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think the key thing to remember about AI, there's a lot of hype right now. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it is yet to be seen how AI will actually play out for the trucking industry. But the reality is that there are tools out there that are AI driven that do help with productivity. And I think as a business owner, that's where you need to focus. Does this make people more productive and able to produce more at a lower cost? And if that is the case, then it's worth investing in. Be very, very careful, though, of what's called like technology creep, where all of a sudden we are adding technology, we're adding monthly expense to have that technology in our business, but it's not actually translating in our people being more productive. So you just have to watch out for that. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to help me prepare this review of Fullbay's State of Heavy Duty Repairs annual report. Really appreciate your contribution on that. I think this is really good data. Obviously, there's so much more that we could have talked about. So if you haven't already, go over to the show notes of this episode, click the link, and get your copy of this report. Thanks, Jennifer, for being on the show.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening and or watching the Heavy Duty Parts Report. We're so glad that you stuck with us right to the very end. If you haven't already, make sure you follow the show. And as always, I want to encourage you to be heavy duty. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to subscribe to the Heavy Duty Parts Report YouTube channel, and click here to watch another great episode.